Welcome back to Proxam, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about how terrain benefits the Craftworld Eldar in 10th edition Warhammer 40K. So GW came out with an article recently covering how terrain would work in the upcoming new edition. And it doesn't look like there's too many changes involved, but the changes that are involved are changes that I believe are really going to help out armies like Craftworld Eldar. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right in. I don't want to make this too long of a video because, again, there aren't too many changes, but I do want to quickly cover them with you guys and just let you guys know about how it's going to benefit our army come the new edition. So before we do that, just a quick overview. We're going to be discussing the new GW revealed terrain rules for 10th edition, and we're going to be looking at how it can affect the Craftworld Eldar. So the first important piece of information the GW gave us regarding terrain is that basically anything that receives the benefit of cover now is just adding +1 to saving throws. So there's no more distinction between light cover and dense cover. That's gone. It's just basically all light cover now. Also, you cannot get better than a 3+ save while benefiting from cover against AP0 weapons. So Space Marines or anything with a 3+ save in cover will not be able to get a 2+ save against AP0 weapons. So the other thing that this directly says, though, and if you read in between the lines of this, it says, having the benefit of cover will not improve saves of a 3+ or better against weapons with an armor penetration characteristic of 0. This means a unit will never have its save improved to 2+ by terrain. So what this also means is that units that also get a bonus to their cover saves, things like Rangers, right, Scouts, won't be able to improve their save beyond a 3+. So most units, this doesn't matter, but like, for example, Scouts, who have a 4+ base save and have the Scout Cloak for an additional +1 save, it looks like based on this, they're not going to be able to get a 2+ save either. Their save will only be able to get a 3+, basically. So you can get up to a 3+ save, but not further against weapons with an AP of 0. Now, of course, if you have an AP of 1, you could possibly benefit from that, right? So like if there's an AP -1 weapon and you're a Scout, you go to a 2+, and then the AP -1 weapon brings you to a 3+. That's still fine, but you're not going to get a 2+ save against AP0 weapons is basically what they're saying here, which is something I like. I do like that because I think for a long time, models were stacking armor saves a little bit too much. So if you had even Terminators in cover, that would be problematic because they were getting a better, save in cover. Of course, Terminators in this edition are going to be very tough anyway and are probably still going to be pretty menacing regardless. But even normal Space Marines with 3+ save in light cover were getting basically a 2+ save. So that was pretty tough to deal with if you didn't ignore cover. And that's one of the reasons why Masterful Shots for Craftworld Eldar was such a big deal, because it ignored that. So here's the other thing is models can only benefit from cover once. So they can't benefit from multiple different cover types, which is also good, right? So they can't get +1 multiple times. So they can only get it once. As for the different types of terrain, GW has condensed this considerably. So there's only a couple of types of terrain that you have to worry about now. There's not so many different kinds. So the first one is craters and rubble. So this is a common battlefield, terrain piece that basically all of us play with in one form or another. I know that on our table, we play with several craters on the battlefield just because they're easy to place models into and, they leave a pretty good footprint and stuff like that. So while infantry units are within them, they benefit from cover. So basically they're getting +1 to their save. Basically it's the same thing as before, right? It's just giving light cover. Barricades and fuel pipes are a little bit different. Basically now what they do is they extend the engagement range to 2 inches for units fighting on the opposite sides of the barricade. So if you have 2 units fighting, their engagement range is effectively 2 inches. And cover is granted to infantry models within 3 inches and not fully visible to the firing unit due to the barricade itself. Battlefield debris is another type of terrain, so cover is granted to models not fully visible to the attacker while obscured by this terrain feature. So if you have some battlefield debris and your unit is behind it, partially obscured, then you will get the benefit of cover. All units also seem to benefit from this. So vehicles, monsters, infantry, jet bikes, basically every single unit can benefit from this type of terrain. Hills and sealed structures are basically the same thing. Cover is granted to models not fully visible to the attacker while obscured by this terrain feature, and all units seem to benefit once again. So vehicles, monsters, infantry, jet bikes, whatever, etc. will benefit from it if they are obscured by that piece of terrain. Woods work basically the same way in that if you shoot through it, models that you're targeting will get the benefit of cover. So now it's just light cover instead of dense cover. So all units also seem to benefit from this. Vehicles, monsters, and infantry, etc. It does not affect aircraft, though, or towering units. So I'm guessing, things like Wraith Knights won't be able to benefit, and things like, the Hemlock Wraith Fighter won't benefit, but most other models in the game will, as long as you are firing through that piece of terrain. Also, units within that piece of terrain, whether they're obscured or not, will also get the benefit of cover. So the new rules on ruins is probably the most interesting part of this because there's a few mechanics that are different. It still gives obscuring terrain. So it's basically obscuring terrain from this edition. The footprint blocks line of sight, which is really important. I was worried that this wasn't going to be in the game anymore, but I'm glad it is. I'm glad they still have something like this so that, more fragile armies can actually survive a couple of turns of shooting. This also means that pretty much on all boards, you need to have some ruins. And I know they just say here ruins. Obviously, you could proxy whatever you want to on your own boards, but it's important that whatever you're using is going to count as ruins. So again, I did a video on, proper terrain usage many moons ago. But basically, whenever you're playing Craftworld Eldar, or really any faction, you should always make sure there's at least 4 sizable pieces of obscuring terrain on the board. And that's at the very least, right? My group, for example, plays with 4 larger pieces of terrain just so we can field more, valuable units that are a little bit bigger. And we have actually found that's a really balanced way to be able to field a lot of different things without having to worry about, whether or not we're going to be able to hide our units in the first couple of turns of the game. Okay, so moving on with the ruins. So models in or not fully visible due to the terrain feature also get cover. So if they're in it, they get the benefit of cover. And here's the cool part. Models 6 inches or higher, so on another story, than the ground floor, get -1 additional AP on their ranged weapons, as long as they're targeting a unit on the ground level. So this is really powerful. This is basically a way for a lot of our units to get additional AP. Now, the cool thing about this also is that Eldar units being extremely fast, being able to move, and advance and also still shoot their weapons typically because they are most likely going to be able to get the assault weapon keyword on a lot of their abilities, or weapons I should say, are going to be able to benefit greatly from this. And a couple units come to mind that could be extremely powerful as well. Dark Reapers are a unit that's pretty static, and unless they get battle focus, are, pretty much going to be visible to your enemy army. So having them perched 6 inches above where they can get an additional AP and also just get light cover and a couple of other things might be an extremely good option. And in some cases, if you still have the ability to use things like Fire and Fade, you could potentially get your Dark Reapers into a safer spot after they shoot 6 inches above, right? So this is also a pretty good thing that might block visibility. Again, runes are very high, so if your opponent can actually see your Dark Reapers on that level, but cannot see them on the bottom story because of some other piece of terrain, not that piece of terrain itself, but another piece of terrain may be blocking their view, then yeah, that would be an extremely helpful thing to be able to do. So Dark Reapers, Swooping Hawks are very easily able to get to high stories, and also units like Warp Spiders, obviously, if they have the range, and, other units as well. So this basically just confirms that. Ruins, right? If you actually look at what GW is saying here, they're saying completely block visibility of all models through their footprint, regardless of how much you can see through their fancy Gothic windows, right? So basically they're saying, yeah, there's still obscuring terrain in the game, which is great, which is a really good thing. And then they also talk about the Plunging Fire rule as well. An important note, though, to make about the Plunging Fire rule, I've heard a couple of players saying it would be good on things like tanks and stuff, which is true, But just remember that tanks often have a lot of issues getting onto buildings and ruins in the first place. So you're probably not going to see tanks be able to do that unless they're very small, like skimmers or land speeders or, Vipers or something like that. I would even say wave serpents probably couldn't do this, nor could night spinners or larger vehicles in both the Eldar Codex and other codexes. I just don't think it'll be physically possible to fit that model there. And remember, if your model cannot physically fit somewhere, then you cannot place it there, right? So you can't have a Ghost Ark sitting on the top story of a ruin if that top story is only 3 inches deep, right? Because the Ghost Ark is bigger than that. So you do have to keep those things in mind. So how could these terrain changes affect the Craftworld Eldar? So I think the loss of dense cover will obviously mean that high AP attacks will be more effective against certain units. So the thing I think of that comes to mind is tanks, right? I think that the loss of dense cover, especially shooting through woods and stuff like that, is going to negatively affect some of our vehicles against high AP attacks. So, for example, the Wave Serpent. The Wave Serpent has a 5+ invulnerable save, so high AP attacks can't really get past that 5+. And giving a +1 to armor instead of a -1 to hit is actually not as good. So if you take a look at the math behind it, let's say something with AP -4 shoots at a Wave Serpent in this edition. If it's behind dense cover, it's giving -1 to hit, and it's getting its 5+ invul. In 10th edition, it's not getting the -1 to hit, it's just getting its 5+ invul, because even with a +1 to save, it's still going to take, that Melta weapon is still going to take that Wave Serpent to its invul save anyway. So I think against high AP attacks, it's not going to be as good. And again, this will have less of an effect on infantry and jet bikes and things like that, obviously, but it's going to have more of an effect on things like Wave Serpents, Falcons, War Walkers, things of that nature. The other thing is, our units with a 3-up save won't be able to get a 2-up save in cover against AP0 weapons. So AP0 weapons are actually pretty good against Eldar because every single failed save is going to be a dead Eldar model. And this is going to affect units like Dark Reapers, Striking Scorpions, Fire Dragons, our Aspect Warriors with a 3+ armor save, but also our Wraith units, our Wraith Guard and Wraith Blades. So yeah, in the Wraith Blade and Wraith Guard case, are people really going to be firing AP0 weapons at those models? Probably not in most cases, but you're just not going to be able to get a better than a 2+ save with those units in cover, which could matter, right? I mean, I know that, we have, Protect and Fortune and things like that, and those will probably still be in the game in some way, shape, or form, but this is going to make Wraith Guard and Wraith Blades slightly less durable against those types of weapons. The Plunging Fire mechanic is extremely powerful when combined with our fast-moving and highly mobile units. I'm talking things like Swooping Hawks, like I said, are going to be extremely good. The thing about Swooping Hawks is normally they don't have AP values, right? They're not really a heavily damage-dealing unit. But because of the Plunging Fire mechanic, they could be very effective at clearing out light to heavy infantry. And, even a Space Marine unit could suffer significant damage from, Strength 4 -1 AP weapons, especially at the volume that Swooping Hawks can put them out at. Now, one thing I will say about Swooping Hawks is we don't know exactly how Skyleap is going to work. It might be a once per game ability. And if it is a once per game ability, I think this is going to be a lot less relevant, obviously. Being able to do this one time and still remain safe using Skyleap after you shoot versus being able to do it every single turn is going to be a big difference. So we'll have to just wait and see on how they price Swooping Hawks and what kind of abilities they give them. But here's my take on this. I don't think they're going to give Swooping Hawks Skyleap like they do now. I think they're definitely going to limit that somehow, either by basically changing the way Skyleap works altogether or limiting it to once per game. So we'll just see on that, but that's what I think is going to happen with Swooping Hawks. So again, if you're out there and you're wondering what units to buy and stuff like that for the new edition, perhaps limit yourself to one unit, because I doubt that we're going to see Swooping Hawk spam come again. But Plunging Fire is something that can be very good with other units as well. And I was actually thinking the other day, not only Guardians, right, getting an extra AP on their Shuriken weapons, but also Corsairs with their Shuriken rifles. Now, check this out. Corsairs with Shuriken rifles posted up on the top story of a ruin, benefiting from light cover, are going to essentially get a 3+ save. They're going to be able to get a -1 AP on pretty much all their weapons. So that includes things like blasters and also, Shuriken cannons and things like that, which they can also take. And because of the fact that Corsairs are more of a lone operator unit that can't really be joined easily by characters, they're going to need all the little buffs they can get, and posting this unit up on top of a ruin not only gives them a better armor save, makes them a little bit more durable, but also gives them more damage for their cost. So I think these guys are going to be a pretty good unit to keep in your backfield and just keep your opponent honest with, line of sight and stuff like that. Now, obviously, they're still pretty fragile, even with the +1 armor, but they're cheap enough to where you can have them be kind of expendable and, again, give your opponent something to worry about that is a high-damaging, long-range anti-infantry unit. So, in conclusion, I think the terrain rules, for the most part, have been condensed and dense cover has been eliminated, which I'm mixed about, right? Dense cover was good for certain units, but bad for others. Eldar, however, seemed to gain the most advantages from these changes, as obscuring terrain is obviously still present in the ruins, and also Plunging Fire heavily benefits faster flying units and units that have a longer range that are a bit more expendable, like Corsairs. And also, cover not working on units with a 3+ or better against AP0 is also greatly beneficial for the most part, especially with weapons like scatter lasers. Yeah, it doesn't help our units like Striking Scorpions and Dark Reapers and Fire Dragons with AP0 weapons, but it's much more devastating against armies that pretty much, all have a 3+. So Space Marines, for example, have an army-wide 3+ save. Sisters of Battle have an army-wide 3+ save. And now scatter lasers are going to be much more effective against those targets. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Just wanted to do a quick one covering the terrain features and basically just my opening thoughts on what and how they might affect the Craftworld Eldar. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you once again, by the way, to all of my patrons and supporters for all the help you've given me in helping this channel grow and making it better. Thank you once again. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Watch out later this week. We got a couple more videos coming your way. One on a 500-point battle report between me and my Imperial Guard opponent in my current Escalation League. And also, as new releases are made by GW, I will be covering those later this week as well. All right, everybody, peace out, and see you guys next time. Have a good one. See you later.